Hello, hello. Shannon with Stack of Stones here to talk to you today about compassion fatigue. If you've been around me, you know that I get super fired up about compassion fatigue because I think it's a really big deal if you do guardian work. So here at Stack of Stones, we're all about taking good care of guardians, and that's the word we use to wrap together anyone whose job is to help somebody in distress. Okay, so if you are healthcare, death care, social services, first responder, your job is helping people who are experiencing distress. That comes with a lot of compassion fatigue. So one of the reasons I get so fired up about compassion fatigue is I think that it's the underlying cause for a lot of our emotional distress a lot of times. It is super sneaky. So first let me tell you what it is, and then I'll tell you why it's so sneaky and why I think it's so damaging. So at the base, compassion fatigue is the cost of providing empathy and compassion. Okay, pretty straightforward, right? When you do the work that we do, you're providing a lot of empathy. And the way I want you to think about this is imagine yourself as a bucket of water. Okay, that bucket of water is full of compassion. When you graduate from the academy or school or wherever it is that you went to go prepare to do your guardian role, you're a big, shiny, fresh bucket of water, right? Tons of compassion and excitement for the job. Then you go out and start serving, right? And sometimes when we serve somebody, we use a little bit of compassion, right? If somebody's super kind, they're grateful, they're respectful, we're able to solve the problem. Sometimes that's not a lot of water out of the bucket at all. Other times there's a lot more water out of the bucket. So I'll tell you the scenarios I see pop up that tend to use a lot of water. So one thing to keep in mind is if somebody's in distress, they're not going to be at their best, right? Whether they're in pain, they're afraid, they're angry, they're grieving, right? If they're in a trauma space, whatever's going on, you're not generally getting them at their best. So a lot of times you're getting something from them, but you have to stay really calm and collected and professional, okay? That exchange can be expensive. Okay, so if someone is really intense and you need to stay really calm, just keep in mind that that's going to use some water. Okay, nothing wrong with it. It is the name of the game, but it uses water. Okay. Another place we use water is if someone is disrespectful, right? So if we're getting a lot of disrespect, if we're getting a lot of entitlement, demanding, that can use a ton of water, right? Especially if someone's using phrases like, "Hey, I pay my taxes, so I pay your paycheck." That always goes well, right? Again, I want you to just think about that water getting spooned out of the bucket, right? Big old ladlefuls. Okay. And then one of the biggest places I see compassion fatigue pop up is frequent flyers, right? So this would be any of those scenarios that just keep happening. And this happens in all kinds of different roles. But in general, this is what makes frequent flyers so tricky. One, it's repetitive, right? So anytime something's repetitive, it's going to get on our nerves. Two, there's also generally a layer of annoyance in some way, right? If this is somebody who keeps calling 911 to complain about politics, right? And they're tying up the lines because they feel entitled to have their moment and have their feelings heard. This could be calling 911 and making you actually respond to a call in the middle of the night because they are drunk and they fell down again for the third time this week, right? Or if you're law enforcement, this is someone experiencing homelessness and mental health and maybe substance, and they're screaming at people on the sidewalk, and you are responding again for the third time this week, right? These wear us down. So one is the repetition. Two is it tends to be annoying. Three, I'm going to assume that if you're a guardian, you like to fix things. You like to make them better, right? You're in this to help solve problems. We can't generally fix frequent flyers, right? If someone is showing up at the ER over and over and over complaining about pain because they're looking for meds, that's a really hard problem to fix. Right? When you roll up, if you're law enforcement, if you roll up on this person who's screaming at on the sidewalk, I mean, you can take them in or you can put them on a hold, but then they're just going to be back out. You're just using system resources. It's not going to fix the problem. You're going to talk to the same person tomorrow, right? I think that inability to fix the problem is part of what uses a ton of water, okay? Think about yourself as a bucket. Think about all the different scenarios that use up that water. That's how compassion fatigue works. I think part of why it's so dangerous is a couple of different things. So one, it's just sneaky, right? So sometimes we're not noticing how much water is being taken out, so it sneaks up on us. Okay, if there's a critical incident or a big thing that happens, we know what's wrong. Compassion fatigue is real foggy, right? It's the death of 1,000 paper cuts. You can't identify a wound, but you're bleeding out, okay? Another thing to keep in mind is it destroys our relationships. Okay, so if you get home at the end of the day and that bucket of water, so your compassion and empathy is totally drained because you've been doling it out all day at work, and your partner needs some compassion and empathy, your kids, your mom broke her computer again, right? Whatever it is, people need you to be present for them, and you're just you're tapped, you're empty. That can start to really wear on our relationships. It's going to happen every now and then, of course, that's fairly normal, but if it happens consistently over time, that's when our relationships start to really fray. Okay, so that's a problem because we need our relationships to stay healthy and well. I also see it really mess up our sense of our own self. Okay, so compassion fatigue, one of the reasons I'm so passionate is one of the darkest times in my life was because of compassion fatigue. I didn't know that's why. No one had ever taught me about it. I didn't understand. Right? This is long before I went back to grad school and switched to becoming a therapist. But I was in a pit. I was using a lot of compassion in the role I was in. I was tapped out. And in the midst of that, I was super grumpy. I lost my ability to get stuff done. Like generally, I'm a pretty high performer. I can get things done. And all of a sudden, I just could not complete tasks. I couldn't maintain focus. I was super overwhelmed. There was a level of like hatred and anger in me that was not normal. So that felt super weird. I felt like a total ass, right? All this started to feel incredibly shameful, which then sunk me deeper into the pit. Okay. Those are the reasons I think compassion fatigue is a big deal. That sense of self, that identity, that shame, it destroys our relationships, and then it's sneaky. It sneaks in on us, okay? So you may be feeling this. As I describe this, you might be like, ugh, just know that it's a thing. We can reverse it, we can protect against it, we can take care of it, but that has to be a very active stance, okay? We can't just know about compassion fatigue and it automatically goes away. We have to very actively work to kind of refill that bucket and rebuild ourselves, okay? So if you're feeling it, then go ahead and take some steps to take care of yourself, okay? Reach out, get some support, build a resilience routine, all the different things we know are important for you, okay? Thank you for the compassion you are spreading all about town. Thank you for taking care of those folks that are hard. I appreciate the work that you do. Our communities need you, and take care of yourself in the midst of it.